Welcome to SOS for Your Life, Emergency Wisdom for Everyday Life. I'm your host, Susie St. Angelo, and thanks for showing up today. In today's episode, we're going to be talking to Nat Karopmatri. Nat Karopmatri is a multifaceted guide and mentor. He supports ambitious professionals to heal self-sabotage so they can deepen self-trust, reclaim joy and energy, and succeed in their purpose. Behind his professional mission, Nat loves to travel, is a grandpa to 2 vibrant grandkids, and enjoys dancing the Argentino tango with his beloved wife, Olga. Now let's get into today's episode and meet our guest, Nat Karopmatri. Hi, Nat. How are you?
I'm good, Susie. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. I'm looking forward to our conversation today.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. So Nat, tell our audience a little bit about yourself and your background.
Wow. I never know where to start with these things. Like, which lifetime do you want me to start with?
Yeah, I can relate to that, Nat. Yes.
Well, the simplest answer is I consider myself a guide, a mentor, a coach. I've gone around the block a number of times in terms of discovering who I am, how I fit in, being okay with not fitting in, and
I can relate to that.
Yeah, coming to this point where my work, my work has always supported my own evolution, and from that I share what I've learned with serving as a guide for other people. I'm big on supporting people to find their own path, to be okay with their own path, to celebrate their own path. And it's not always easy, based on societal's conditioning, family conditioning, but also kind of what we're here to be and do, right? Sometimes we come in with a checklist of things to experience, and it's so easy to judge ourselves and think that there's something wrong with ourselves and that, we're the only ones. And everything I'm sharing with you right now is what I've experienced. And I feel like that's a big part of what I'm here to teach, is to remind people that, okay, yeah, sometimes we are here to experience what we're here to experience, and not all of it is fun. Oftentimes it's not fun. I feel like I checked off all the boxes in terms of, hardships and struggles and emotional stuff. But I would say because of that, I have a lot of compassion for other people and what they're going through, and perhaps opening doors to compassion and understanding where maybe they don't see themselves, or where maybe someone else is quick to judge.
Well, I can see that about you, and I don't know you very well. We've just had a conversation before this conversation, but I can tell that about you. And I think sometimes people are so close to the forest that they can't see through the trees. And it helps to have someone like you and me to allow them to step back and see what they've gone through and see where they are now, and to appreciate that, and also to give them grace.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, we're not always great at giving ourselves grace, and sometimes we need someone else to give ourselves that permission.
Mm-hmm. So I see where you are a holistic life coach. How did you get to this point? What was there an aha moment, or was there just a series of chapters in your life that just led you to this?
Yes. I would say that from an early age, I was always interested in what I called back then, or I think what a lot of people called alternative medicine. I was always interested in energy work. I grew up in a family that was Buddhist. My dad was a devout Buddhist, or still is, and he taught me meditation when I was a kid. And so I think I had an openness to that, but I also explored other esoteric things that I don't think a lot of young kids would study, kind of, in the closet studying all that stuff.
Non-traditional.
Non-traditional. But with that, my dad was a doctor. He's retired now. And so I had the influence of, having a healing profession in the house. And, I remember going on rounds with him, going to the hospital, meeting his patients. And so I'm sure that influenced me as well. And honestly, there was a time when I wanted to become a traditional doctor, working in medicine, until I realized that wasn't the right path for me. But it didn't stop me from struggling through school and taking MCATs and, applying to medical schools and things like that. Fortunately, I realized along the way that wasn't my path. So, but I mean, coming back to your question, there was always me walking on both sides, leaning into traditional because that felt safe. And exploring the untraditional because that's where my interest was, but not necessarily jumping into it right away because it was just so different from, what mainstream was. And so I had challenges in leaning into that because, what will people think? This is too out there, those sort of thoughts. And, so it took me some time to embrace both.
I can certainly relate to that as I shifted personally from traditional medicine provider to a functional medicine provider. And it just felt like it aligned with me. And once it aligned, I really didn't worry. And I ended up attracting more people who were like that as well. And so it's been a real eye-opener and a blessing to have that experience and know that type of help is out there, that one size does not fit all for people.
Yeah. Yeah. The other thing that occurs to me right now is I have a friend, a colleague, Jennifer Urizio. She does this work called soul language. And one of my soul languages is called the prophet, which is kind of like part of my mission is to bring new information, new understanding. But that same kind of curiosity as a kid exploring esoteric stuff or non-traditional work. And then also bringing in new thought or that sort of thing has always been challenging because, again, it's like you're at the forefront and I'm meant to bring stuff, and I'm like, but who am I? Who am I to bring this stuff? That and I see it like any pioneer, any visionary has that, right? They bring even like franchise was a thing that was never accepted in the beginning, and now it's a model of businesses.
Sure. So when people come to you, or at least initially schedule maybe a consultation with you, are there any themes that you see, any reoccurring themes?
Yeah, my current work right now is centered around self-sabotage. So procrastination, perfectionism, people pleasing, not being clear with boundaries, not sticking to boundaries. So, and so sure, there are definitely themes where people will, I mentioned they're people pleasing, or they're procrastinating, they're overthinking, they're avoiding things that they want to do, they're avoiding things that they really want to have. They say yes to things that they really want to say no to, right? I mean, these things that I think people can really relate to, and those are the themes, and they've tried to approach it by changing their mindset, for instance, right? They're like, oh, I must be thinking about this wrong, or I must be, I need to work on my mindset to change my beliefs. And I was in that camp for a while, until I realized that the change that I needed and then my people need is to be more embodied, to be more in their bodies and less in their mind. And so I think that's where mindset falls short, because it's you're in your head and you're trying to come at it from your head, when really this other theme is that they're not comfortable being in their bodies. They're not comfortable being with discomfort in their bodies, and they have a tendency to avoid that and try to find a different route, and that might look like mindset, or that might look like trying to gain more knowledge and more information, but still not really making the breakthroughs that they desire.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's also being in alignment. And I think that we haven't been taught how to be in alignment. And maybe that's something too. Do you do that as a part of your services? You help people drop into their body and become more attuned and aligned with who they are, and to accept who they are?
Yeah, I do that. But that usually comes after the releasing of the resistance. Because I see self-sabotage as a form of self-protection. And so we're walking around in protective mode, and we're walking around with filters, right? So we tend to see others, we tend to see the world through the filter that we see ourselves through, right? So like an example would be, in my work, I talk about archetypes, and I have this perfectionist archetype. And the perfectionist strives to make things right. They're striving for rightness, but they're at the same time worried about making things wrong or getting it wrong. And so they have this judgment filter that they can't ever be wrong. And then as a result, they might judge other people for being wrong, right? So unless we work through that filter, it's really hard to come into alignment. And so I have this process called the resistance release technique. And by leading people through that, helping them expand their capacity to be with discomfort, it also moves that stuck energy, that the protection that's in our body, right? And then from there, people are more open to being in touch with what's really in alignment. Because before then, what's in alignment, on some level they might feel it, but on another level it might come completely from their head on what they think is alignment.
Well, and to your point, it sounds like there's a new form of vulnerability that people feel, and they need to know they can trust you to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
To release.
Yeah. They need to trust me, and through the process, they learn to trust themselves.
Yes.
Right. Yes. In my bio, I often talk about healing self-sabotage as a way to deepen self-trust. Because when we don't feel comfortable in our bodies, we tend to go to our heads and we try to rationalize and intellectualize and, try to make sense of things just through being logical. And there is a place for that. I'm not saying throw out being logical or rational. There is a place for that. But when that becomes the the go-to for everything, then like, yeah, I don't feel like they're necessarily present anymore. And they're now in the story and the narrative of like how they think things are.
And so your self-sabotage, you probably see people who want to self-sabotage relationships, diets, careers. I mean, just about anything, I would assume, but those would
Yeah.
maybe the top three I would think people would be most interested in, you know?
Yeah. And it's rarely conscious. Sometimes it is, but it's often something that we've learned that seem to have made sense. Like, maybe as a kid. And I mean, this is a speculation. We never really know for sure. And healing self-sabotage doesn't mean that we have to dig up the past. So I just want to put that out there. But, it could have come from something innocent like, mom or dad saying, be a good kid. And then, you'll get this. Or be a good kid and then mom or dad will be happy. And so as a kid, you don't know that you're not actually responsible for other people's feelings. But you're made to feel that way. And then, what happens? You do the thing that worked. And then the next time you do the thing and it doesn't work. And from the limited, agency you have as a kid, right? A limited understanding, you might think, oh, I'm the problem here, right? Like, how could my mom or dad who loved me so much, I must have missed something here. And that could be the start of perfectionism, right? I missed a detail and I need to be more perfect next time.
And I need to be a people pleaser.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Yeah, I need to please mom or dad because when I do, they're happy and then I feel more safe. I feel more loved. I feel more valued.
I can relate to that. I joke that I'm a recovering people pleaser. That through my career, I chose a service industry where I was good at that because that meant that people liked me and they were happy, and on some level that was great. And that on another level, I wasn't putting healthy boundaries up and saying no when I said yes.
Yeah. Yeah. And, what I tell people is that it's not their fault. It's not your fault, right? It doesn't mean that you're weak. It doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with you. This is just the circumstances that you were in. And I often tell people that the brilliant young you, did what it needed to do to get its needs met, to feel loved, to, be nurtured. You did what you needed to out of your own brilliance. And but what has happened is that way of being, that way of coping with life has followed you into adulthood and it's running the show. It's back to your question about self-sabotage in relationships. Sure. We people please, we hold back. We don't speak up about things that are important. These are all things that we learned that were good for us, right? We don't want to rock the boat. All these things that are good until they're no longer good, until you realize, okay, this isn't working for me because whatever comes up, resentment, frustration, dissatisfaction. And it's not necessarily the other person, but it's also not necessarily you. It's just learning a new way to communicate, learning a new way to take up space, to bring up conversations and be with the discomfort, because we have in ourselves this programming, right? This conditioning that says, if I speak up, then this is going to happen. And we live by that one possibility that we didn't like, that happened once or twice or maybe several times. And it became lodged in your body as if, it's kind of like an equation. If this, then that. We live by that, right? But by learning to be with discomfort, knowing that you're okay, and having a conversation, you can see that there's other possibilities that can come out. And even if it turns out to be similar than before, you have more agency, more authority, more autonomy as an adult now. You're not a kid anymore to respond differently.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but I thought that it's more self-awareness, so that you know when that comes up again, whether it's that same feeling or another one, that you don't have to do like the whack-a-mole game and whack it down and push it down. You can live with that discomfort, and perhaps something will come out of that discomfort that provides growth in that person.
Yeah. And the discomfort, you said it great here, because the discomfort may also start to dissipate over time, because that discomfort is our body's way of protection. It's basically, putting up the alarm saying, don't go there. Remember what happened last time? Don't go there. And so it's very convincing, except it's kind of narrow-minded, right? It's not taking in all the possibilities. And so, for me personally, I used to avoid confrontation or confrontative conversations, which really are just conversations. But
True.
But in my body, that felt like, oh my God, I got to confront this situation and talk about it. And so for whatever it is, I used to think, if I bring this up, then the energy is going to be weird between us. And I don't like that weirdness. And I don't like what happens. Like in the past, maybe I brought something up and I got the silent treatment, and I hate the silent treatment. And I don't want to do that. So I'm going to people please this, or I'm going to avoid this situation and let it go on, except that I'm not really getting anything that I want. I'm abandoning myself in the process of trying to avoid discomfort. And so I learned that, okay, I need to bring this up. It's important for me to discuss this. I can be in conversation and be with the intensity in my body, feel the discomfort in my body while having the conversation. And then I can see, yes, all the bells and alarms are going off in my body saying, danger, danger. But I get to see that, oh, wait, the outcome is different. Yes, I expected this, but no, it's not this. And this is how we start to shift things and also live in alignment with who we are, right? I think there's this other important piece that's coming up for me, is that I used to try to be in alignment with how I thought life should be, meaning like align with abundance or align with, the perfect type of relationship. But it was all very mental. But it was mental from a place of, I want these things in my life so that I could feel safe. But they never provided safety for me. And I was always kind of in this survival, fight, flight, freeze mode, living from that place, trying to control my environment or control people so that I could feel safe. And that didn't work out for me. Even in terms of like law of attraction and manifestation, like I was like, okay, I want to manifest X amount of dollars so that I could feel safe. Now, I didn't know that was what it was, but over time I got to see like, oh, I want these things because I don't feel safe, or I don't feel loved, or I don't feel valued. And I think that if I do these things, it's going to change things, but it didn't. And so that's where my work comes back to our being, and how I'm being with discomfort, and how by doing that, being present with the discomfort and seeing that I'm also okay through the intensity, then things open up for me. And then back to your question about alignment. Yeah, then I'm more in alignment with what works best for me. And then the rest of life mirrors that.
So, first of all, thank you for sharing your own personal situation and story. Secondly, I wonder, after you go through this discomfort, Nat, do you have a process, because that's so intense for your body that you have just been through? Is there something that you do to go, okay, I need to either calm my nervous system, or I need to do something that, you know, that makes me feel a little more balanced? I don't know where I'm leading with this, but you've just been through this intense process, or you've been through this tense process with your client, and your client has gone through it.
Yeah. So I will say that after, I mentioned this resistance release technique. I offer that in a 90-minute session. And after the session happens, I do encourage my clients to take it easy, listen to their body, rest, not necessarily jump back into regular life as they think it should be, right? So drink water, nurture themselves, things like that, because a lot of energy has moved. With that said, part of the technique is after being with the intensity of the discomfort, I do help them tune into their greatest self. I do this process where it's kind of a sense of visualization, intuition, but if their greatness was controlled by a volume dial, right? What level dial are they at? And then turning it up and practicing being with it at a level 10. Because what I find is, not only do people spend a lot of time and energy trying to protect and prevent being told that they're not enough, or an idiot, or what they're creating isn't up to snuff, but they also spend a lot of time and energy trying not to show up as their greatest selves. They're sensitive to being told that they're egotistic, or too proud, or something like that. There's something wrong with being great. And so in my technique, I help people look at, okay, where are you sabotaging yourself based on the things you don't want to be told, but where are you also sabotaging yourself based on the other end of being great, being confident, being successful. So a lot of us have some triggers around that as well. And that learning to be with that discomfort in our bodies actually creates capacity for it.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. I can understand that and relate to it as a breathwork facilitator. Things come up during even a short breathwork session, and it might even be shocking for that person, but it's healthy to know you can release it and move on. So I don't know if this next question is fair or not, but I'm going to ask you: is there maybe a success story you can share with our audience without naming names? Just something that you feel really good about the work you've done with a client.
Yeah, absolutely. I can share several. People come to me. I can share two quick ones. I had someone come to me saying, Nat, I have this new body of work that I really love, but I haven't been sharing it. And it's been months. And I don't know why I haven't been sharing it. And I thought that it was because I needed this worksheet. And so my husband talked to me about it, and he designed his worksheet for me, and he asked, "Is that what you want?" And she said, "Yeah, it's exactly what I wanted." And then she sat on that, and she didn't share her work, right? And I'm sure we've all been there. Like even my earlier stories of, getting into non-traditional healing work and hesitating, right? So we did the session, and one of the things that came out was that she was afraid of her work being too out there and that people wouldn't get it. And because of that fear, and it did tie back to something in childhood, but it happened to come up. We didn't have to dig it up. And so we went through the process, and then afterwards, after about a week, she emailed me and said, "Nat, you wouldn't believe it, but I feel so much freer in sharing my work, and my people love it." And that, that's like simple success. One other, if I can share,
please.
I had person come to me and say, I really want to prioritize my well-being, and I've been meaning to make time to exercise, and I've been meaning to make time to prep my food better, but I can never find the time. And I've been telling myself I want to do this for at least a year, and I haven't been able to do it. So we looked at it, went through the technique, and it came out that when she was younger, she something happened, and she felt like people weren't giving her enough attention, that she felt abandoned. And so in return, out of love, she was putting her family first, wanted to make sure that they didn't feel like someone wasn't around to support them, right? So completely innocent, completely out of love. But that kept her, the fear of being told that she's inconsiderate or not there for her family, kept her from making time for herself. So we looked at that, went through the technique, and then a week later she said, "Oh my God, Nat, I am finding time all over the place to exercise, to plan my meals. I'm eating healthier, and it's a beautiful thing."
Mm-hmm. Those are both beautiful stories, and I think people can certainly relate to both of those. The former is what I would call analysis paralysis.
It can be, sure. I mean, sometimes it's not even a conscious, like, oh, I'm overanalyzing this. It's just like a feeling in the body that, like, I want to share this, but I'm not. Right? And that's usually what happens in self-sabotage. It's never a clear understanding. I often talk about how we try to negotiate with ourselves, right? Like, oh, I should do this, but I'm not doing this. I should do this, but I'm not doing this. And I think this is where this technique comes in really helpful. Really helpful is because it bypasses the rational mind. It needs to. It's not something that needs to make sense, but it's impactful.
Well, sure. So I ask all of my guests, what is your SOS? What's that? What are those simple steps or asimple steps that someone listening today could do to move the needle forward in their life? Besides reaching out to you, of course, we'd love to have people do that.
Yeah. So my go-to would be, and this is a great way to cultivate more awareness, be more attentive to our bodies, right? A body awareness is whenever you're feeling stressed, whenever you're feeling like you're avoiding something, but it would just keep it simple. Whenever you're feeling stressed, acknowledge it. Step one, acknowledge it. I'm feeling stressed. I'm thinking a lot. I'm worried about this. Like, name it. And I find it's even helpful to write it down, to get it out of your head. But to acknowledge it, because we don't tend to do that. We're conditioned to notice it and then run past it, or suppress
or bury it.
Bury it.
Yes,
right. So, don't sweep it under the rug. Don't suppress it. Don't acknowledge it and allow it to be there. That's step one. Acknowledge and allow. And then step two is connect to your breathing. Consciously breathe and see that you can allow the, like, if we're looking at, I don't know, like I think of like a juggler, like juggling balls, right? But like you can, instead of juggling, you could just place them on a table. So we don't need that, like, keep juggling energy, because that's just exhausting. But like, you have the ball of whatever you're feeling, the ball of whatever you're thinking, put it on the table, and then at the same time breathe, so that you can see that you can be with all of it and find your center.
I love the visual, because that really is helpful to be able to see that. Yes.
Yeah. So you have like 3 balls. You're no longer juggling them. They're no longer spinning around. You just grab and say, I acknowledge my feelings. I acknowledge my thoughts in this moment. And let me breathe with a full awareness of what my thoughts were and what my emotions are.
Mm-hmm. Love that. I think it's a great tip. Is there any question that you wish I had asked you?
I feel like I want to re-emphasize that self-sabotage or healing self-sabotage is not about mindset. We tend to go to like, oh, I need to work on my mindset. And sure, part of the process is looking at to see what the beliefs are, but only to use them as leverage to get in touch with our bodies and the emotions that are kind of blocked, right? And so, so I think I just wanted to emphasize that it's not necessarily mindset work that's going to cause the shift here. And it's not that you're not working hard enough, or you're not devoting more time to this. Oftentimes, we've already devoted so much time and energy into this. It's really, we got to slow down and listen to our bodies and take care of that. I think of it often kind of like a little kid. You're a parent and you got a little toddler, and he or she's crying and grabbing on your pant leg and wants your attention. So there's that part of us that wants attention, and we've been spending our whole lives ignoring it and moving on, thinking that there's something external that's going to make us feel okay. And actually, we need to just pause, sit down with that little one inside of us and give it attention and let it know it's okay. And then all the mental stuff quiets down, because that's all that little one is. It just wants attention and love, and we haven't given it.
Well, that's a beautiful way to end our conversation, Nat. And I want to ask you, where can our listeners find Nat Chiropmetry?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I want to say you've been saying my last name beautifully, and it's great. I know you had
working at it.
I'm completely okay. I've heard enough versions of it to be okay with it, but I appreciate your work on it. So I would say the first place people can find me is inquisitivejourneys.com. That's my website. And if you do /be with, they can download an audio program that in essence is that go-to SOS that I talked about earlier. It's, I guide people through the process of like noticing what they're thinking, what they're feeling, and then being okay with it, being present with it. So they can go there. And then you can find me on Instagram and LinkedIn and Facebook. And I believe I gave you those links, Susie.
You did. And I will include them in the description when the podcast airs. So thank you, Nat, so much for being a guest on SOS for Your Life, Emergency Wisdom for Everyday Life. I'm grateful that our paths have crossed, and I hope they continue to cross, and I wish you all the best.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Susie. This has been such a delight. You're such a gracious host. You really, I felt very welcome, and like you create this very welcome, opening energy. And so I felt like energy just flowed and conversation flowed really well. Thank you.
Thank you. Friends, sadly, that's all the time we have today. Thank you for listening to SOS for Your Life, Emergency Wisdom for Everyday Life. Today's episode was a conversation with my guest, Nat Karotmatri, and why we self-sabotage and people please, and being okay with being in the discomfort. Quick reminder on how you can support this podcast. Like and share, send me a review, or any question you might have, and your question might be featured on an upcoming episode. Follow me on Instagram, and if you'd like to be added to my weekly email newsletter, please send me your email address. I'm happy to include you. And reach out to me if you're interested in finding out more about coaching and breathwork sessions. Until next time, take care, and I'll see you soon.